a product strategist who is helping startups and larger organizations find their product and market fit. He has been guiding companies with product strategy and various marketing methods with focus on repeat usage and retention. He coaches teams in organizations on various modern methodologies like design thinking, lean principles, and behavioral economics in order to create habit forming products. Interesting, isn't it? Helping a few companies establish two-sided marketplace businesses, which is also known as platform economy. And in case if you are running a startup or if you are planning to innovate in a larger organization, you should and must reach out to him to discuss product strategy. So we will know more about Anand CR and also dive deep into product strategy and innovation in today's episode. I'm sure you guys are equally excited as I am. Hello. Hi there. Welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series, The Guiding Voice for a Better Future. This podcast is to help professional students, IT employees, and entrepreneurs to shape their careers. Dear listeners, in every episode, we interact with industry experts or thought leaders or academicians or coaches across the globe to drive some insightful conversation that will help each of our audience learn great things. Also, we share an interesting trivia or a fun fact about the IT world or technology towards the end. So stay tuned towards the end. So this is your host Navin Samala, and I'll be going solo as Sudhakar is on personal emergency. So today we are going to discuss a topic: how design thinking and lean startup can help entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. And we are pleased to welcome Anand to our show.
Thank you so much, Naveen. Very glad to be here.
Pleasure is all ours, Anand. And let's get started. So we'll delve into our conversation. And to begin with, can we talk briefly about your career journey? How you got into this product strategy, and also talk a bit about your own startup?
Fair enough. It's been a roller coaster ride and a very interesting one at that. I started being a core techie working with the Indian Institute of Science, writing all kinds of core level TCP/IP, Internet Technologies code, and that kind of stuff. But eventually, then I worked with Wipro, then Nortel Networks through Wipro, and some startups, Motorola briefly. After spending about 8 years, I took a decision that from tech, I would like to play the role of how to bridge tech and the market requirements that happen. So how is it that I can translate requirements in the market, how I can drive business and marry that to tech solutions which can address the needs of the customer. So that kind of a profile was product management, which I discovered around in 2007-8. I made a shift to product management, and since then I have stuck with it. I absolutely love it. Product management, if there are any aspiring product managers out there, you can talk to me. I would love to take you through what kind of a course it is, what kind of a journey it is. It is an awesome journey. I've spent time with Vodafone, with Jio, in some startups, heading the product team and practically building the startup from scratch. Now I consult with several companies on product strategy. It's been a wonderful core journey, and from tech to product management and to consulting. So I'm glad to talk about not just helping you with any product strategy requirements, but I would love to talk to you about what kind of a journey it is to be in product management.
That's quite a lot, Anand. You have started as a hardcore techie and now into product management, not only launching your own product but guiding the young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, so which is such a noble thing. And you mentioned about this product management aspect. Seems it is addictive, and in fact we had a conversation with one of our ex-colleagues as part of our episode number. She quoted beautifully about this product manager. You are like a CEO of your product. Like
Absolutely.
whatever you visualize, whatever you visualize, and you are the one who is actually strategizing it and seeing it live. So that's such a wonderful feeling.
That's true. You get to drive. You own the responsibility to make sure that your product actually succeeds in the market. When it does, the kind of thrill and the kind of adrenaline rush that you get can only be experienced, and that is something everybody should. Whoever has that liking should definitely experience. That is something I would definitely suggest.
I can completely resonate with you. You can get that feeling. It's my product or it's my vision, and now it's live,
Yeah. It's
right?
your baby. Yeah, it's your baby.
It's your baby. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Yeah. Now, talking a bit about the design thinking part of it, because of late there has been a
Yeah.
lot of boom around this design thinking. And can you talk briefly about what this design thinking is in a nutshell, so that our audience get a feel of it, and then they can decide whether or not it will be their mainstream.
Absolutely. So, I mean, when I started out in product management, what product management actually was not exactly a well-defined structure. So you did everything that was needed to be done, and you hope that somehow your product works and it clicks in the market. But in the last 6 7 years, at least in the last 1 decade, what has happened is there is a systematic frameworks. There are frameworks which you can use. One of them is design thinking, which works in the problem space, and the other one is lean startup mechanisms, which was championed by Eric Rice, which helps you in the solution space. These two mechanisms work very well to discover what the market actually wants and how you should go about it, building the product. These two mechanisms, these frameworks, help you reduce the risk a lot when you want to when you want to build something and take it to the market. So it reduces the risk quite a bit. In specific, if you're since you're talking about design thinking, as I mentioned, works in the problem space. Let's just take an example. Let's say you are an amazing cook. In other words, you are quite convinced. There are a lot of people who come and tell you that you cook really well, you make amazing dishes, and you get a feeling that you should actually start a business of your own. And nowadays, with Cloud Kitchen, doing that is much, much easier. The amount of capital that you need is also way lesser. So therefore, these options exist, and therefore your inclination to start your own cooking, business is quite strong. But what does happen is that while you did get confirmation from some of your close relatives or friends that you did, that's a very very good starting point. But when you want to take it out into the market, you are still not really very sure what exactly the market wants at a larger scale. So one of the ways to do that is to start with some basic surveys of what kind of food people prefer, how often do they eat out, how often do they order. This is a typical survey that you would create. Fair enough. This survey is done and dusted. You already have a lot of information that you managed to collect yourself by talking to people, and you also read secondary sources, reports and things like that, which were there out there in the market. Now, once you've collected all this data, what typically you do is in a design thinking workshop, you and let's say you have a small little team of 2 3 people, you guys get together, you take a big nice wall, and you identify individual problems, desires that your customers face, the problems that your customer face, and desires that they have, that they want something which may not be available in their place. So you make a collection of all these issues together, and you actually stick it up on a big wall, classify them, and then you very systematically sort out which ones are the most important ones, which ones are not that important, which are the ones which have a lot of resonance with your customers, which are the problems that actually need serious solving, which are the ones which are just wish lists and they're just saying that. How do you read between the lines? When you put 2 3 minds together and start discussing it honestly, sincerely, after listing out all the problems on a visual structure like a wall and a post-it note, it makes the amount of utter clarity that you manage to get is immense. The kind of clarity that you manage to get is immense. In fact, this is not very new. For ages together, for a long time now, detectives, when they want to solve a crime, the way they do go about doing that is to first take a big whiteboard and then stick and write timelines and see, they map how exactly the crime occurred. Now, we are not really solving a crime. Nevertheless, it's as intriguing as solving a crime. Figuring out the market is as nuanced as solving a very difficult crime. It is like that. And there are parallels, and there are, when you discover those nuggets of gold which actually come out when you visualize the whole thing, and when you discuss and put minds together, you may discover that what you initially thought was the actual problem to solve is probably not a problem at all. Your target customers probably don't have that issue at all. They have an issue which is slightly different, and that is the one which requires serious solving. So, and then that information, what problem to solve, is something that design thinking helps you very beautifully, pull out of the earth. And then, you are much clearer. You are very clear what is it that you should actually go after. So design thinking is a framework which helps you unearth what is the problem and what are the desires which you should go after, and which your customers actually require solving. That's what design thinking helps you do.
Yeah, I think these are some amazing analogies that you shared. First one is being a chef, and the second one is solving a crime, the detective scene, and all. So, what resonates with me is it's more about understanding the customer needs in detail so that you know what you are actually trying to focus on. And later on, you have a clear customer journey mapping kind of thing and have a vision for it and just stick to that plan. And at point in time, probably we want to prototype it and then go by the full blown implementation after receiving feedback from the customer.
Correct.
Is my understanding right?
Absolutely. In fact, I've had situations. I've had a few startups with whom I work, and the initial assumptions, what we call as the hypothesis, before the design thinking exercise of which is the problem that requires solving. After the exercise, we made a shift along with when we did the overall discussion. There was a shift, and we figured that what we initially started with as the problem to solve was different, and what was required to be solved is actually quite a drastic variation of that has happened. And when that happens, it's a aha moment. Oh, okay, this is the one to solve. Okay, now we get it. That
Yeah.
happens. That's a very, very amazing feeling when you do that.
Yeah. And it reminds one popular comic actually, which says about customer is expecting a
Yeah.
what do you call a swing kind of thing, and
Yeah.
how the technical team interpreted and so on and so forth. Right? Yeah. Yeah,
Correct.
good. Yeah, okay, great insights on the design thinking. And now let's talk about the other topic which you mentioned. This is about the lean startup by Eric Ries. Right?
Yeah.
Can you shed some light around what are the nuggets of lean startup and who it is applicable and all?
Absolutely. So they are like complementary to each other. So design thinking kind of should lead into a lean process. Lean startup mechanisms with an agile development process. If you're doing software, I mean, the lean is not just for lean, and design thinking are definitely not just for software development. So let me make that very clear. It is not just for software products. It could be, like I mentioned in the first case, it could be a restaurant business. It could be if you want to create an electric scooter. You could apply these logics to any business, and you would be better off for doing that than not doing it. It's but then lean, when it comes to software, lean is generally combined with agile methods, and then it works very beautifully, and I've seen people using that very well. So, but then I'll clarify that it's not just for software. Anyway, so coming back to lean, design thinking, as I mentioned, works in the problem space, right? So it is something that you use that framework, design thinking framework, to figure out what is the problem to solve. Once you are kind of confident that this is the problem, 2-3 problems that you want to solve, and this is what you are also good at solving. It's a combination of these two. What is the problem to be solved, and what is it that you are good in solving? What competitive advantage do you have to solve that particular problem? So a combination of that, and you are kind of clear that this is what you want to go after. Now, that problem can be solved in multiple ways. There will be so many solutions to a given problem. So, what is the best method? Which is the best solution? Is not immediately evident. It's not immediately obvious which is the best method to go after. When you want to figure out which is the best method, one of the ways to go about is a lean startup framework. Use the lean startup framework as such. I'll give you an example of how a lean mechanism works. There was this company called Zappos which got bought out by Amazon quite a long time back, and it is one of the celebrated examples of how to implement a lean startup mechanism. So this guy wanted to, who founded Zappos, he wanted to sell shoes online, and he believed that he had a taste in shoes which people would absolutely love. That's his belief, and that's the problem that he wanted to solve. That real aesthetic, beautifully designed shoes and footwear which he would want to sell online. Now, what he could have done is he could have created an entire website. He could have created a database in the back end. He could have created a front end website, bought inventory, bought a lot of shoes, stored it in his house, and then as and when an order came, he could have shipped it. That is the good old way of creating the smallest e-commerce business possible. That's how many e-commerce businesses are actually run. They store it in a room in their house and they start off a business with starting a e-commerce shop on Shopify, kind of a online cloud-based e-commerce shop. But what he did was something different. What he did was, instead of investing in the inventory, getting all those shoes, storing it in his house, instead of doing all these things, all he did was he just went to several shops, good shoe and footwear shops in and around his place, and he spoke to the owners there, and he said, look, I'm going to take shots, good snaps of your shoes, good ones which I feel will sell well, and then if I make a sale, you will get a solid cut of it, but I will do it on my website. So that's what he did. He basically took shots of his own shots of shoes. He presented it well on a very, very, very simple website that he created, nothing, no bells and whistles, and he just put some basic dollars into marketing it, little bit. It caught on like wildfire. Most important thing that happened was that it validated his hypothesis that it will actually sell, that his taste and his kind of choice of shoes actually strikes a chord with many customers, and there is actually a market for it, and he can continue to make a bigger enterprise out of this idea. In case that kind of a response had not come, his investment was not deep. He had not much to burn. He had not taken any inventory sitting in his house. He doesn't know what to do with it. None of those problems existed. So he first validated the idea without burning cash, without burning effort, without burning time. And it was a quick, simple solution, validated the idea, after which, he put in the capital required to make it a bigger enterprise. Very similar story with Dropbox. Dropbox, nowadays we are all used to using Google Docs, and we are using OneDrive of Microsoft and all that. But Dropbox thought of this idea initially where multiple devices, your phone, your laptop, your tablet, content, files, structure in any of these devices should be commonly available on the cloud, and you should be able to access it from anywhere. This concept was there in the minds, but it was not there in any software. So what the Dropbox founders did, they basically did not build a product at all. What they built was an idea, was a video. They just built a simple video, and that video was built in such a way that it clearly described the benefits, how beautifully you can move across devices and then access the same file from any device. It was so compelling. It was such a neatly created video. And then at the end of the video, they said, subscribe to this. If you're interested in this idea, subscribe to this. He had so many people subscribe to just that video concept. He just presented the idea and people agreed to it by subscribing to that. When they did that, it was a big validation of that idea resonates with so many people, and that kind of completely made sure that it was an idea worth pursuing and putting money into. And after that, they went about building something like Dropbox, and they built it quickly in an agile framework with building a minimum viable. This concept of building a very very minimum mechanism to test the idea is called minimum viable product. And this is something that you build, the minimum viable product, also called a MVP, famously nowadays. The MVP is built quickly. Go test the idea, validate it, come back, learn from it, come back, make changes, go back, check again, come back, 2-3 iterations, and then you will figure out whether this is the right solution which will work in the market or won't work in the market. When you have figured that out, you hit something called a product market fit, when you figure out what is the right solution which actually works. This is how Lean basically, I'm just, giving you a quick summary of how Lean works and with 2 examples, but it's a little more involved. But broadly, this is the idea. This is the idea behind, how Lean works after you have done some good, solid design thinking.
Yeah, amazing examples. I love the Dropbox and Zappos examples, and few things which I was able to grasp during this conversation is it's about believing in these leap of faith assumptions, and in case before you trust, or you need to validate them. First trust it and then validate, test the waters, and if everything goes well, incorporate that feedback, and then based on the product market fitment, you go with the full-blown implementation. Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, gut feel is very good to have. I will definitely not discount gut feel. Gut feel is an extremely important thing to get. But then don't just put money on your gut feel. validate it with a simple minimum viable product, and then after validation, put your money into it and effort into it. That's the whole philosophy behind these concepts.
Yep, got it. So, Anand, now talking about how these two philosophies, if I may call them, like
Yeah.
design thinking and lean startup, how are they going to help both the entrepreneurs as well as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at it, the most important thing that these two things do, design thinking and lean, they reduce risk. When I say they reduce risk, what I mean is they make sure that, they reduce the risk that you are ending up barking up the wrong tree. You should not end up climbing the wrong tree where there is no fruit. So they reduce the risk. When I say reduce the risk, there is still a chance. After doing all this exercise, it is still possible that, you do end up barking up the wrong tree, but it reduces the chance of that happening a lot. It reduces it a lot. So for an entrepreneur who has very limited resources, who has very limited money to spend, he does not have the kind of people to doesn't have the luxury to say, we will spend 6 months trying to build this, and if it doesn't work, I'm okay, I'll shelve this project. That kind of money is not what he has. It's a kind of a survival question. And you don't want, having put together a team, having brought in capital, you don't want to burn it away on a wrong idea, which does not resonate with the market. So that's on the problem space. On the lean, on the solution space, it makes it, when you implement lean, it basically helps you, an entrepreneur can have very minimum resources to build a very, very basic idea. Like in the Dropbox example, you just have to spend on the video, nothing more, right? And make sure that the video comes out right. And then you spend a little bit of marketing to spread the video out. That's it. Your idea is validated. You are not really assembling a team, paying them salaries. You're not, building code. None of this expenditure happens. As an entrepreneur, that happens. Even for an entrepreneur, what happens is that if you are in a big company, you want to try something new. You are in charge of new product development. You are in charge of innovation. You don't have an unlimited budget. You also have work with a very limited budget. It's not an infinite. Yes, there are deep pockets, but the deep pockets are not entirely for you. So if you have to prove an idea, it always pays to make sure that the idea is validated before you make it, expand it bigger and scale it up. So in both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, it definitely helps a lot to adopt these mechanisms of design and lean, and then live by that philosophy and then take it forward from there.
Yeah, just to summarize my understanding, it's about failing fast in case so, right? And
Yeah.
as you are validating at a much
Yes.
early
Yes.
stage and all, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's failing. The more you fail, the better. The
Yeah.
point is that success doesn't teach you as much as failure does. Success,
Yeah.
there are only one or two ways to succeed, but there are infinite ways to, fail. But it doesn't mean you fail all the infinite ways, but a few good failures teaches you what not to do. And that's a very, very important learning, which success doesn't teach. It helps a lot it makes sense to fail a few times, understand what doesn't work, what you shouldn't do, and then find the success and get the product market fit. It's a trial and error method, but do it fast, fail fast, and get to the product market fit. That is the overall philosophy about. Yes, absolutely.
Great, Anand. Nice tips so far. Talking about the product vision, how does someone create a product vision and any steps to be followed, or what are your nuances here?
I guess one of the best ways to talk about product vision is to, start with an example. One of my all-time favorite product visions is that of what Elon Musk has for SpaceX, to make human beings an interplanetary species. As simple as that. It's very, very simple, to the point. What you do for that is a bunch of things. You can build strategies around it. You can do design thinking. You can do lean startup mechanisms to try something. All this should align with your North Star metric, which is, when you're navigating your ship, you always look for the North Star, so that you don't lose your way in the sea, right? So the North Star, the guiding direction which you want to always follow and not lose sight of, is your product vision. So you are very clear, what is it that you exist for? What is your purpose of this entire enterprise, right? So that is defined by how well you can articulate in simple words your product vision. Now it should not just be in your head as a founder, or as part of your idea about how to create a product. It should actually move in thinking from your mind. It should actually percolate to each and every person in your organization, right? That is how you create a product vision. So if you take that example of SpaceX, the idea is to make human beings an interplanetary species. That vision, everything everybody does, starting from the engineer who is building a rocket engine to somebody who is creating managing HR in SpaceX, everybody is driven by that particular vision, which says, look, we are all here to make human beings an interplanetary species. That is the power of what a vision can do. I mean, many companies have a product vision. It is written somewhere, it is sitting somewhere in a document, and then the only people who know about it is the original founder. Even the CEO doesn't know about it. That sucks. That's terrible. But unfortunately, vision, they many people end up writing a vision just for the heck of it. That doesn't help. That kind of a vision should actually percolate and get buy-in from each and every member who's a stakeholder in the company. Every employee in the company should actually internalize that vision, and that's as powerful as what a vision should be. If that is strong, then everything you do will be aligned with the vision.
Yeah. So recently, I was talking to one of the entrepreneurs, and he shared a couple of experience about starting his own venture and all. And finally, the product that they built, right, it didn't see the end of the tunnel,
Okay.
right? And it's more about the product market fitment aspect, which I felt. So can you throw some light on how someone should focus on this product market fitment before embarking on their entrepreneurial journey?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. In fact, the finding product market fit is the holy grail of entrepreneurship, right? So you have hit the nail on its head when you manage to find product market fit. So you do all that. You set a product vision, and then you know what you want to do, what is your purpose. From there, you do some design thinking to understand what exactly your target customers want, and then later you do some lean startup mechanisms to try different solutions and see what fits very well with your customers. What kind of solution will your customer accept? Just because they have a problem, it doesn't mean they will accept any kind of solution you give them. You need to figure out what solution will work to address their particular problem. All these things, you do all this work only to finally arrive at a product market fit. So we spoke about iterative design, right? So you do lean, like you build something very simple, you take it to the market, prove the idea, learn what works, learn what doesn't work, you come back to the drawing board, repeat again very quickly, and then do again. You don't spend 6 months to do a detailed product project plan, and none of those things happen. It happens in a question of weeks. Your first entry into the market happens today. You learn something in the next 1 week. You come back, one more week of changes, make development changes, go back into the market very quickly, and then see now what is happening. Are they giving you different feedback? Is it working better? You do about 3-4 iterations, and at one point you will figure out that this is the set of things which actually works. This is what they actually want, and this is how we should create the solution. Now that is where you probably hit product market fit. How to identify that you have actually reached a product market fit stage? The simplest way to do that is to see what happens if you take away the product. You have built a product, you've actually created the product, and you want to see, if you take away the product, will it be sorely missed by your customer? So you say, I'm going to stop this product for some time. What do you think? Can we, if I take away this product, what will you do? And if your target customer is telling you that, oh, no, don't take it away. We want this. We want something like this. Or he or one customer says, okay, when will you give me this kind of product? I'm willing to pay for it. This is a real validation of you have reached the product market fit stage, that people are willing to put money. If they're making statements like, yeah, it's quite nice, but we'll think about it, you have still not reached product market fit. You have to be very ruthless in evaluating yourself whether you have reached product market fit. I mean, it's very easy to say, yeah, I've reached it. Now let me go and build something bigger. Let me put more money into it. Let me get some funds. Don't do that till you actually know for sure that your customer feels sad that you're taking it away, or your customer is asking you, hey, give me a better version right now. Can you add this feature and give it to me? When can you give it to me? Suppose he asks you this question, can you add this feature? By when can you give this to me? That is a kind of a question which you understand that, okay, this guy is really, really resonating with what I am building. That's the indication of where you have reached product market fit. I mean, there is no one way to figure out whether you have reached product market fit, but these are some examples of how you can identify. It's a psychological thing. These are some ways to figure out that you actually have your customers with you, on board with you, who are willing to put money where their confirmation is. That's a product market fit.
Fabulous tips, I would say. And this reminds me of the lean principle, which is implement pull mechanism. Like if you are trying to push the product and stop it, in case if customers are pulling, then you have reached that particular
Yeah.
stage, okay, wherein the product market fitment is done. Wonderful. So fantastic conversation so far, Anand, but it has been very serious, and let us try to entertain our audience with a few interesting rapid fire questions. And I'm going to ask you few funny questions, and wherein you can respond very crisply. If you are okay, I'll go ahead with my first question.
I'll try.
I think it will be much easy. Surely it is going to be a smooth ride for you. So let me begin my first question. What is the most adventurous thing that you have done so far?
River rafting through pretty rough waters.
Wow, I'm yet to do that. So here comes my second bullet out of the rapid fire. What is your favorite failure?
We were building a messaging app, trying to do something like WhatsApp,
Mhm.
and we miserably failed. And till today, that failure has taught me truckloads of what I should not do. That's an amazing learning, but yeah, amazing failure. Favorite failure.
Awesome and fair enough. Coming to the next one. Was there any situation where you stayed up for more than 24 hours?
I am not that kind of a guy. I can't do that.
Lucky
Physically,
you.
not very possible.
Right. Yeah, here comes the next one. What has been a question on your mind which never got answered so far?
Why people don't dig deep into the subject that they love. That always intrigues me. Yeah, you ask a CA why a particular tax exists, what is the logic behind the tax, he usually doesn't know. He knows that the tax is there and what you are supposed to do according to that tax, but why did that tax actually come into being, usually draws a blank. You ask a doctor about how evolution works, do you get how exactly Darwin's natural selection works, the doctor doesn't know about it. So these are certain things that always gets me intrigued, that their own field, but they're not digging deep enough.
Interesting one. It's more about questioning the status quo. Like we are not supposed to carry what we have been told, but in case if someone asks questions at the right time, then probably we'll find answers and it evolves. Great conversation so far. The last one for rapid fire. What is the best gift that you have received from someone so far?
The gift of clarity that some of my gurus have given me in so many fields. It may be I learned from some people who gave me a lot of clarity in marketing, some people who gave me a lot of clarity in philosophy. So many gurus that you keep learning from in day-to-day life, those people are whom I'm indebted to. That doesn't come with a money exchange, so that's a gift.
Yeah, completely agree. And in fact, you are fortunate enough to get those things.
Absolutely.
So fantastic conversation so far, and thank you for being so sport in the rapid fire. And going back to the mainstream, I have one last question for this entire conversation, Anand. What will be your one piece of advice to those aspiring to make big in their careers?
Yeah, yeah, if somebody asks for this kind of a slightly generic advice, my only advice, I'm a fan of what Warren Buffett always says. For to evaluate anybody, if you are hiring someone or if you are evaluating yourself, by and large you evaluate yourself on three dimensions, right? So one is how much energy you have to get certain things. What is the fire in your belly to get things done? What is the intelligence? When I say intelligence, it's not just how much IQ you have, it's also about how hardworking and how deep you want to get into a subject. You don't have to be blessed with an amazing brain like an Einstein, but you need to work hard enough to develop enough knowledge to do something before you step into something. So that is the intelligence part. The energy part to make things happen. The third, after having these two components, the third is that of energy, integrity. You do all these things, but if integrity isn't there, if you're not honest, if you cut corners, if you cheat, it doesn't take you anywhere. The best people, we have seen the most intelligent people fail dramatically. Fantastic failures have happened. They've fallen from amazing heights and they have, crashed and made a mess of themselves. So if integrity is not there, the first two elements are anyway useless. These are things coming. I'm not saying anything on my own. It's all from Warren Buffett. So this is something that I have learned both to evaluate myself as well as others when when you evaluate somebody else to either hire or do whatever you are doing in your career, right? So stick with these three principles, and I think you are good to go. Whatever you want to do, startup, work in some company, any of these activities you are comfortable with, you may want to evaluate yourself with these three dimensions. I think that should help.
Some amazing tips again. So, Anand, this has been a fabulous conversation, and thank you so much for joining us today and spending your precious time sharing your
Absolutely my
insights with
pleasure.
our audience.
Absolutely my pleasure, Naveen. I hope your audience enjoys it.
Absolutely. So pleasure is all ours, and a couple of things which will stay longer with me are like in case if you are planning to launch your own product, probably you can use design thinking while understanding problem in detail and lean startup methodology while implementing the solution, and be conscious about spending money. So before you burn cash, try to validate what you are planning to build and test the waters and then go with the full blown implementation. And once it is there, you may want to test the product market fitment by trying to withdraw or doing some survey kind of thing. And that's how you can reach your dreams. Thank you so much for the wonderful insights. And I'm sure it will be beneficial to all our audience out there. And dear listeners, you can refer to Anand's LinkedIn profile in the show notes and connect with him if you are having any queries related to product management or design thinking, lean startup, so on and so forth. So thanks again, Anand, for being part of the Guiding Voice journey in shaping the lives and careers of millions across the globe.
Much appreciated. Thank you for having me.
All right, so it brings us to the trivia segment of today's episode. And today's trivia is about CD recorder, the compact disc recorder. And the question is, do you know how much did the first CD recorder cost? I know you are thinking, but let me tell you the secret. It's about 20,000 USD, though it was not commercially released, but it was internally decided as 20,000 USD. Of course, it did not sell for that price in 1991 when it was designed. By 1992, these CD recorders were priced upwards of $10,000 and above. And of course, after 1995, they become more affordable. They started selling little less than $1,000, which is precisely $995. Interesting, isn't it? Thank you for listening. There is more in store, folks. Stay tuned. Take care. Be safe. Until next time, bye bye. And we are signing off for today. See you all in the next episode with another wonderful guest.